Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through different sources, try to pull out those key nuggets of knowledge just to help you get really well informed fast. Today, we're taking a journey into some pretty unexpected and honestly quite unsettling corners of Wikipedia. You know, we all use it for quick facts, but sometimes it shows you things about history, about existence that are genuinely macabre or tragic or just plain bizarre. So, our mission today is to explore a few specific pages that offer this, well, chilling but maybe insightful glimpse into some of those harder truths.
Yeah, and what's really striking, I think, is how these sources, these seemingly everyday websites like Wikipedia, can hold such profound and disturbing insights. These aren't just like sensational stories pulled out of thin air. They're often documented records, history that really make you stop and think about, human nature, science, just how fragile life actually is.
Right. Let's start with something quite heavy, actually. The sheer number of unidentified bodies. It's pretty jarring when you think that in the U.S. alone, there are over 40,000 bodies discovered that, well, they remain unidentified. A lot of them, tragically, murder victims. Think about that. Simply put, nobody knows who they are or, well, who they were. And this anonymity, it can happen for so many reasons. Fingerprints might be destroyed, faces damaged, no DNA match, or maybe, saddest of all, just no one ever came forward. Completely forgotten.
And the Wikipedia page itself, it lists them state by state, often goes into grim detail, how they were killed, missing body parts, whatever little info they have. But what's really unsettling, I find, are those reconstructed images, trying to show what they might have looked like.
Oh yeah, those can be strange.
They really fall into that uncanny valley, almost human, but just boff. It's disturbing. And the names they get: Odessa Jane Doe, Valentine Sally, LA County John Doe, One-Eyed Jack, they're just placeholders, right? It really strips away any sense of who they were as a person. And it makes you ask, well, what does it mean to be forgotten like that? We all want our lives to mean something, to be remembered. In these cases, they just challenge that so directly. It feels incredibly lonely, even just reading about it.
Okay, you might want to sort of brace yourself for this next one. It involves a family secret, a life basically sacrificed, and a really disturbing misuse of power. You know it's going to be rough when the first thing you see on the page is a photo caption like Rosemary Kennedy during 1938, 3 years before her lobotomy.
Like so.
So this is Rosemary Kennedy, JFK's sister, daughter of Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. She had learning difficulties from birth, oxygen deprivation, they think. Her IQ was estimated around 60, 70, so like an 8 to 12-year-old mental capacity. But apparently she had a relatively normal upbringing, though the family kept her condition very hidden. Very few people knew.
Right. But as she got older, things changed. She became more rebellious, maybe strong-willed, probably out of frustration, trying to keep up with this very high-achieving family. And this apparently became a problem for her father's political ambitions. So Joseph Kennedy Sr. made this frankly shocking decision. He decided she should have a lobotomy, this new neurosurgical procedure. Doctors told him it would make her calm again, stop the outbursts. I feel like that is just really highlights how things like family reputation, societal pressure can just tragically steamroll someone's well-being.
And at that time, this procedure, the lobotomy, it had only been done about 80 times in the U.S. It basically involved cutting parts of the brain. But despite the risks, the lack of understanding, he went ahead with it for Rosemary. One of the doctors actually described it later, and it's horrific. He said, we went through the top of the head. I think she was awake. We put an instrument inside. And then he said, we made an estimate on how far to cut based on how she responded. When she began to become incoherent, they stopped.
Can you even imagine asking her to recite prayers or sing while they're cutting into her brain? Something apparently like a butter knife, just to see how much function they were destroying.
Yeah, it was. It was a complete catastrophe. Rosemary was left with the mental capacity of a 2-year-old. Couldn't communicate, couldn't walk properly, lost control of basic functions. She was put in an institution and basically disowned by the family. They didn't visit, didn't acknowledge her for decades.
Yeah. Someone on Reddit commented, and it really stuck with me. In a way, it's even more sadder that she lived to be 86, effectively trapped in a shell. It's just such a powerful, devastating example of what happens when someone's will, their identity, is just crushed by family or society, especially using something like experimental medicine.
Okay, our next stop is, well, it's even darker, more systemic. We're going into the horrors of war and dehumanization.
Yeah.
Unit 731, this is a Japanese research unit during World War II. And the Wikipedia page, it just lays out these horrific acts that people are capable of when they completely dehumanize others, treating them like lab rats, prisoners of war mostly.
It's almost unbelievable. They'd infect victims with diseases, then cut them open while they were alive, no anesthetic, just to see the effects on their organs. Adults, children, it didn't matter. Others had limbs amputated while conscious. Sometimes they'd reattach them to the opposite side just to see what happened. They'd freeze limbs to study gangrene. They developed biological weapons, spread bubonic plague in China, tested flamethrowers, grenades on living people, starvation, injecting animal blood, lethal X-ray doses. The list just goes on and on.
How many people?
They estimate around 250,000 people were killed, many infants among them, killed in these horrific ways by Unit 731. It really makes you ask, what happens when science or the pursuit of knowledge just completely overrides ethics, when humanity gets sacrificed. And what's also deeply disturbing? The researchers. They were given immunity by the U.S. after the war in exchange for their data. Survivor accounts at the time were just dismissed as communist propaganda.
All right, okay. If you're eating, you might genuinely want to pause this for a minute. Honestly, I had to take a break after reading about this next guy, Terrer. His story is just. It's about this insatiable, never-ending hunger. Unlike anything else ever documented, apparently. He was French, and descriptions say he had this, creepily wide mouth, strained teeth, lips so thin they were almost invisible. And the weirdest part, he could apparently eat his own body weight in meat in a single day, but not gain weight. His stomach would just balloon up, then go back to normal. Seems impossible, right?
Yeah.
But doctors at the time documented it. Nothing like it since.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the amount, it was what he ate. Basically anything. He was known to sneak around drinking blood, eating dead bodies.
Oh.
The source material has this really graphic bit. Terrer was presented with a live cat. He tore the cat's abdomen open with his teeth and drank its blood, and proceeded to eat the entire cat aside from its bones before vomiting up its fur and skin.
Oh my God, that's...
Yeah. And after that, apparently hospital staff gave him snakes, lizards, puppies. He ate them all. Swallowed a whole eel without chewing once. It's not just about extreme hunger, is it? It points to something profoundly disturbed, both physically and mentally, pushing boundaries of what we even think is possible for a human body.
Eventually, he was kicked out of a hospital after a 14-month-old baby disappeared, and everyone suspected him. He died in 1798. Apparently told the doctor he thought a golden fork he'd eaten 2 years before was killing him. It was actually tuberculosis.
And the autopsy. Equally bizarre. His body rotted really fast. Most surgeons wouldn't touch it. But one did. Found his gullet was abnormally wide. You could apparently see straight down into his stomach when they opened his mouth. His body was full of pus, liver and gallbladder were huge, and his stomach was enormous, covered in ulcers, filling up most of his abdomen.
And the fork.
Never found. It's just this incredible medical anomaly, but it also reveals something quite dark about, primal human urges or possibilities, maybe. Truly unforgettable case.
Okay, let's shift gears completely. A real jarring change of pace, maybe, to a place you normally associate with, happiness, Disney World. There's actually a Wikipedia page listing disturbing incidents there. Since 2001, Disney has had to report incidents, injuries, deaths, serious crimes to the state. And even if you've maybe heard of one or two things over the years, when you actually look at the page, the list is way longer than you'd probably expect, certainly longer than you'd like.
Some really tragic ones stand out. An 8-year-old boy crushed by a Disney bus in 2010, a 4-year-old drowned in the moat around Cinderella's castle, and more recently, that awful alligator attack that killed a 2-year-old near the Seven Seas Lagoon.
Right, I remember that.
Horrible.
Yeah. And okay, sure, most things on the list aren't directly Disney's fault maybe, but it's still just unnerving. To think that the happiest place on earth has been the backdrop for so much tragedy, it kind of reminds you, doesn't it? That even in places designed purely for safety and joy, the unpredictable, the tragic, it can still happen. Moving from accidental tragedy back to, deliberate, almost unimaginable depravity. Let's talk about Albert Fish. He was a serial killer. Truly one profoundly disturbed individual. He'd lure children, torture them, mutilate, murder, and then practice cannibalism using what he called his implements of hell cleavers, saws. But the most chilling part of his Wikipedia page, for me anyway, wasn't just the list of crimes. It's the unedited letter he sent to the mother of one victim, 10-year-old Grace Budd. He'd met the family, planned to take the son initially, but then saw Grace and changed his target.
Yeah, the letter. It's incredibly hard to read. Even excerpts are rough. He writes, on Sunday, June the 3rd, 1928, Grace sat on my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her on the pretense of taking her to a party. Then I took her to an empty house in Westchester. I went upstairs and stripped all of my clothes off. I knew if I did not, I'll get her blood on them.
Awful.
And then he describes how she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death. And I cut her into small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook it, and eat it. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I mean, can you even begin to imagine receiving a letter like that, confirming not just that your missing child is dead, but it's beyond comprehension? What does that reveal about the absolute depths someone can sink to, the kind of pain that lasts forever? He was caught eventually and executed.
Okay, next up, an incident from the industrial world. A drilling rig, the Byford Dolphin. We know these offshore rigs are dangerous places to work, right? The Byford Dolphin had several deadly incidents listed on its page, but one stands out for just the sheer instantaneous horror of it. The diving bell accident, November 5th, 1983. A diving bell, it's basically a chamber to get divers down to deep ocean depths under pressure.
Right, so the setup was 4 divers, D1 to D4, and 2 dive tenders, T1, T2. They were in these decompression chambers connected to the bell by a sort of trunk, sealed with a clamp. Now, the crucial, absolute vital step was, before that clamp connecting the bell could be removed, the door to the chamber had to be sealed completely tight. Otherwise, you get explosive decompression. And for some reason, that day, one tender opened the clamp before Diver 4, Trolls Hellevik, had fully sealed that door. The result was immediate, catastrophic, explosive decompression. The bell blew off. The tender who opened the clamp was killed instantly. Air rushed out of the chamber with unbelievable force. The pressure dropped from 9 atmospheres, that's like being 80 meters underwater, down to 1 atmosphere, normal sea level, in just a fraction of a second. And for Hellevik, the description is just horrifying. His body was sucked through an opening only 60 centimeters wide, violently dismembered. It says all of his internal organs were expelled from his chest and abdomen, found like 10 meters away on the other side. Yeah. Only his trachea, part of his spine, some intestine remained inside.
The other 3 divers died instantly too. Their blood literally boiled from the pressure drop.
It's just, the physics of it are terrifying. A simple mistake, a procedural error, unleashing that kind of unimaginable instant force, turns a human error into this extreme, immediate tragedy, a really chilling reminder of how quickly things can go catastrophically wrong.
Okay, while we're on grim subjects, there are many disturbing execution methods you can read about, but this next one, execution by blowing from a gun, just seems like complete overkill. The victim is tied to the muzzle of a cannon, back facing it. They fire the cannon. The torso is just obliterated.
Yeah, there's a witness account from a George Carter stent. He described it. His head is seen to go straight up into the air, some 40 or 50 feet. The arms fly off right and left. The legs drop to the ground. And the body is literally blown away altogether, not a vestige being seen. He also mentioned sometimes bone shards would fly out and hit onlookers. It was used by British troops in India mainly. Seems incredibly brutal compared to, say, a firing squad, doesn't it? It makes you wonder about the motivations, right? What does that kind of extreme execution say about cruelty, about making punishment a spectacle?
Let's turn to another really horrific historical event from WWII, the Nanking Massacre. This is one of those truly haunting, bloody moments in history. The details, the photos on the Wikipedia page, they're really hard to look at. December 1937, Japanese forces capture Nanking in China. Then for 6 weeks, just unthinkable war crimes.
Girls, women, all ages, raped, often raped to death. Japanese officers holding actual massacre competitions who could kill the most civilians with a sword. People buried alive just for kicks. A third of the city burned. Executions on a massive scale. Up to 300,000 people murdered.
300,000.
Yeah. And the photos on the page, I mean, they're necessary, but brutal. A dead child in the dirt. A boy beaten to death for not taking his hat off. A woman impaled with the bayonet. Rivers of bodies. A prisoner just moments before being beheaded. You see those images, and, well, they're a stark reminder, aren't they, of what happens, of the need to remember, especially because Japan denied the massacre for decades before finally acknowledging it.
Right.
It underscores the importance of historical truth and the horrifying consequences when people are dehumanized on a mass scale.
Okay, for our last stop today, let's shift to something. Well, it's not overtly creepy like some of the others, but it has its own kind of macabre feel. The Wikipedia page for a timeline of the far future, sometimes called the end of the universe. It basically lays out what scientists predict will happen to Earth and the whole universe over the next billions of years.
Yeah, and the overall takeaway is, well, it's pretty sobering. The further down you read, the more you're just reminded how incredibly fragile we are as a species, how little impact we actually have, cosmically speaking, and, you know, how humanity probably won't be around for nearly as long as we might like to think. It kind of makes you think, doesn't it? Contemplating that ultimate insignificance. What does it teach us about right now, about how we live?
So what does this all mean? We've taken a deep dive today into some really unsettling corners of Wikipedia, pulled out some insights from stories that are, frankly, quite difficult to process, but maybe important to be aware of.
Yeah, maybe the most disturbing thread connecting all these pages isn't just the specific facts, horrifying as they are, but maybe it's what they reveal about us, about the human capacity for both incredible cruelty and deep vulnerability. And also, I think the power of knowledge itself, even uncomfortable knowledge, to make sure these things aren't just swept under the rug or forgotten. So as you're thinking about all this, what stands out most to you from today's deep dive?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into these fascinating, sometimes disturbing pieces of information. We hope you're leaving feeling a little more informed and maybe a lot more curious about what else is out there just under the surface.